Okay, we thought we would start today's show with a song from the show that we are continuing,
The Leftovers.
not the meatloaf, and it goes a little like this. But in Jordantown, the sun shone bright in miracles. Mason! Mason? Oh, shit.
If maybe like this isn't real or whatever,
Yeah.
you still might as well choose.
Like, if this is a video game, like, get that XP. Like,
Yeah.
like level
Basically.
up.
This is where we talk about shows and games and movies. This is where we talk.
That'll be our
That's our
song.
alternate theme
This is where
song.
we talk about
Shows and games and movies. This time,
Hmm.
we're talking about The Leftovers,
Part
Season 2.
Dose.
Part 2 out of 3.
True.
We are assuming you guys have seen Season 1 already.
Yes.
But before we get into it, just a reminder, we've got an email, which is mythologosshow@gmail.com. We've got some socials. And we have, this is our third episode, technically. Technically third,
Well,
or not
technically fourth.
Yeah, but
Religiously.
numerologically,
Roman numerologically.
because we have episode 0, which is like an explainer,
True.
where we talk about ourselves.
True. Narcissistic episode.
It's just 2 monologues on
Two
ourselves.
boys. It's 2 story boys
Specifically,
talking about
our boys. Us
we
as
the
boys.
boys.
On
True.
Amazon Prime. But,
Check it out.
And then we had episode 1 where we talked about Swiss Army Man. Episode 2, we talked about season 1. Now we are at
Silvers.
one of the main reasons why I wanted to do this show,
True. Same.
because this is like a top 3 season of a show for me
Same.
all time.
Same.
And last season we kind of talked about the characters. That was how we structured our episode, where
Mhm.
because I think that's how the show was in season 1. There was like interesting things that happened and obviously themes and stuff, but it was more like trying to get you to understand these
Yeah.
kooky cast of kookaburras. But now I think like you go into season 2 like knowing everyone,
Yeah.
knowing like why they are the way they are,
Mm-hmm.
and this is where it gets a little wacky.
Kookaburras.
This season is kind of like, to boil it down, there's a few things that you could boil it down into, I think, but one thing we're boiling is how I think it's kind of like a commentary on human beings as meaning-making creatures,
True.
in the sense of like a lot of things that happen in our lives, or like even when we observe the universe or God or anything like that we can observe,
Hmm.
we tend to want to find the meaning in it.
Mm.
And when there's nothing that's like obvious or like an easy thing to take away, then we make something for that.
Yeah.
And I think that's how, like, the way the season starts out is with some cave women. Basically, like, a tragedy happens to them. Most of them die except this one.
Yeah, they get like trapped or
There's like
some
a
rock
storm. And like
Yeah.
the one
slide.
woman
Right.
is like, she went to go piss basically, and like that's how she survived. She like
Yeah.
left the cave that they
Yeah.
get trapped in.
Yeah.
And then she goes through this journey, and like she ends up dying, but like she has a baby with her that someone else comes and like saves.
Yeah.
And so, and then it kind of cuts to like present day, and you realize like where this season is taking place is happening where that happened.
Yeah.
And so I think
However
like
many
Yeah.
thousands of years ago.
It kind of makes you, as an audience member, it makes you think like, oh, like there must be something important. There's like some kind of connection to what happened.
Yeah.
And also in the prehistoric, like they're like things that happen that are like coincidences, like the woman going outside of the cave and surviving, and like someone else happening to be there to save her baby. It's like you kind of are primed to think like there's a deeper meaning to like these things happening. There must be a reason, I guess, is what you would say.
Yeah.
And then I think like basically all the characters, because this season, you know, we're in like a new town. It's a town called Miracle, where people believe that like because no one disappeared, that makes Miracle special, sacred in some way.
Yeah.
And so like this whole town is like primed to believe they're like a sacred group of human beings. And when like the main conflict of the season happens, which is like Evie and her friends disappearing, it causes everyone to have to like really reflect and think like, is Miracle special? Like, is it just chance that no one disappeared from here? And like now someone else, like we're like getting our comeuppance or something.
Right.
That's basically the arc that everyone's going on, is like trying to determine whether or not the things that are happening in their lives have a deeper meaning. Yeah. And like, or are they just like happening and people
just like random chance or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know.
And so people come to different conclusions. We'll get into maybe a little bit later.
Yeah.
At the end. But that to me is like the main question of the season, I'd say.
Yeah. And I think another takeaway that I think this season kind of dives into or shows some examples, this idea that no matter what decision or like path you kind of choose to go in life, depending on a situation, it's going to be painful. Like there will be pain. Like sadly, life just has pain. But the point is, if that's the constant that will arrive or is happening, you might as well try to choose the path that will lead to a better future, or like a better outcome on the other side of that moment. Yeah. So I think in this season, like we kind of see that most clearly, or the easiest way of that idea through Kevin, because I mean Kevin's gone through a lot of shit in this last season and this season as well in particular, and the main way I think we see that is with his struggle with Patty. Yeah. Where Patty, for all of you needing a refresher, was the leader of the Guilty Remnant from season 1, the cult, and she killed herself, and Kevin was there, and he kind of blames himself or puts that guilt on himself in a way, and now she's been appearing to him like it seems like hallucinations or some kind of, you know, she's following him around, and she can see her and talk to her, and she talks to him, and this whole thing, and it's kind of been like a torment for Kevin. And so he could just like decide to just put up with it, and then just like oh whatever, like I'm just gonna live with this pain, but it's gonna just get worse and worse and worse, and the future is gonna be shittier. Or he can do what seems to be like presented to him two different options when he kind of talks to his ex-wife Lori, and Lori's like, yo, you gotta like, this is an issue, like, because she was a psychiatrist or psychologist, and it's like, we can help you get through this path, like there's, you know, mental health, like you know, avenues that we can take, like medication, you know, therapy, that we can help you get rid of this in a good way, in a modern sense. Yeah. Or he has this opportunity to go meet Virgil, which is Michael's grandfather, which I think we come to find is John's dad.
I think so.
And
it's a little vague.
John Murphy's dad, yeah. And so he goes and he meets with them, and Virgil says, oh, well, if you want your future to be better, i.e. not having Patty in it anymore, you're going to have to kill yourself. Yeah. And then go face her in like whatever is after that. And it's like, what? And that leads to this craziness. And so he decides to do that. But it's like, Kevin is trying to make his future better. He decides to do a path in that way. But as we come to find, the path that he had to take to get there was really painful. He literally died from poison, and then had to become an assassin in this hotel land and this whole thing. And it was this whole thing. So in life, we have situations that come up, whether it's, you have a breakup, or you lose your job, or you want to have a certain job, but you're not there yet. And you feel like, oh, well, I could just stay what I'm doing and, at least make some money and be okay. And it's stable, it's secure. But you're probably never going to have that happiness or that dream that you desire, So it's might as well just go for the stars, go and try to do something that you think is going to get you to that better place. I think it showed that. But I think what they're showing is even if you try to do that, it's still going to be hard to get there.
Because I think maybe sometimes people assume the thing that is better for you is the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
And that's why people end up I think that's how you get into cycles where you don't improve, because but with Kevin, that he's a good example, because it is a progression for him, because like we said last episode, season 1, he's kind of in the backseat of his own life, where things are happening to him, but he's not really taking charge.
Kind of the cart, not the horse, if you will. Yeah. And
most of this season, that's true, where he's ignoring Patty. Nora is just making these decisions, buy $1 million houses and stuff like that. And he's just going with the flow. But when he decides to do something about it, I think that's a progression for him, because it's he's finally choosing to actually make a difference in his own life.
Yeah.
And that kind of is what enables him to actually be an active agent in other people's lives. I think his journey, especially when he actually dies, is interesting, because it kind of goes to something that I think is another main point here with the season, is you kind of, in your own life, you kind of believe or interpret the events in your life in a way that is kind of specific to you. And the way that with Kevin, I remember when I first saw the episode where he dies, I was this is one of the most exciting things in television. The main character is dead. And then we see him in this hotel where he's we assume this is the afterlife.
Yeah.
And then he goes through this crazy experience and then comes back. But it's also possible that he never even died. That he took this poison.
It's a paralytic or paralyzing. Yeah. Whatever.
And had a dream, because everything that happens in the hotel is dream logic. There's no indication that it's a traditional idea of hell or heaven or whatever. And so it's it's possible that he never died. That's what the show is kind of balancing, with the supernatural and a more grounded explanation.
Yeah.
And I think people will come on different sides of this when they watch this season, based on their own experience in life.
Yeah.
Where I think it's exciting to consider this as possibly getting supernatural, and the world of the leftovers is actually a world where supernatural elements exist.
Yeah.
But it I can't deny that with all the stuff that we see, you can't fully just say that that's exactly what's happening.
Yeah.
And we see that also in Nora's journey this season, where there's this episode called Lens, where she's presented with this idea by the DSD that she is a lens for other people, in the sense of when she's around them, like bad stuff happens. Basically, like that's why they think her whole family died.
Yeah,
like she has some kind of
talk about some bad news. Talk about some low self-esteem after hearing that. Like, oh yeah, you basically fucked over your whole family.
And she she doesn't believe it at first because they say that like she's a lens for the demon Azrael who's gonna come to Earth or something.
Dang, Azrael, dude.
Not again, Azrael. But so she doesn't believe it because it's like that's a ridiculous explanation.
Right.
But then she starts to think about how like when they got to Miracles, when the girls disappeared, and like
2 and 2 together.
When Kevin, like her being around Kevin, is like what has led to him seeing Patty and like all this stuff that's happening to him.
Yeah.
And then she starts to believe that there's maybe some credence to that theory.
Yeah.
But it's like she still has the opportunity to go one way or another, like not believe it or believe it. It's just a matter of like the things that are happening around her are kind of informing her interpretation of that.
Yeah.
And then we kind of see that culminate in like one of the best sequences of the season where her and Erica are arguing, and Erica is taking like a more, you could say, supernatural meaning making approach where she thinks her kids, or Erica, what's the dog? Evie. She thinks Evie disappeared.
Not the Pokemon.
Because Erica was like planning on leaving John.
Yeah.
And this is like a karmic thing or something. Yeah. And then Nora kind of laughs in her face and like mocks that because Nora's in a place where like she doesn't want to give any credence to something like that because she doesn't want to believe that she is also in that position.
Listening to you, it made me think of a thought about something with the season in general, but I think we'll wait till the end.
All right. Well, we can go on to your next.
Yeah, we'll segue then to, I think, another kind of. This is more of a ethical kind of like thought that the show kind of presents. So we get to Lori and Tommy because at the end of season 1, they kind of like came back together, and they kind of seemed like they were just gonna go off and do their own thing from the end of season 1, and so they do. And we find them originally at the beginning of the season. Tommy has kind of taken over this whole like Holy Wayne shtick that he was a part of because they like find people and they're like Lori is leading more of like from her psychologist background. And it's like this AA group type thing. But then at the end, Tommy's like, and if you want your troubles away, like, just come give me a hug.
Yeah.
And so, and then, like, they take the hug and they leave all, like, feeling better, happy, whatever.
Right.
But it's a struggle because Tommy's like, yo, when are we going to tell these people it's like we're just full of shit and it's like just a joke? It's so it's like it's obviously like a con, or they're using the Holy Wayne as like, because it's not real. At least that's what it seems. Yeah. And so Tommy's like this is wrong. Like, we shouldn't be lying to these people that I have like these powers. But Lori's whole thing is like, well, they're leaving this place happier, you know? So it's like this ethical argument of like, what's more important, like, or what's worth doing? Like, is it to show love or like to tell the truth? It's like this like love v truth kind of idea, like classic ethical.
And it's like
discourse.
In the world of the leftovers, that is probably a more like, that's a question that everyone has to deal with. Yeah. Because in a world where people have disappeared, like, it's hard to even know what is reality, like what's real. Yeah. Yeah. And so it kind of makes sense that people would arrive at the conclusion of like, it doesn't matter that this isn't real. Yeah. Like, it's helping people, and like, that's about as good as you can do. Yeah. But I think that you could make the argument for that in our lives, like in this reality. Yeah. Because like, I know like social construct is kind of like a buzzword where it just refers to like everything or things in like society kind of being made up. Yeah. And like you could say like the entire ideas of like government or marriage or whatever, these are all things that we've made
human
in order to like keep like an order and like keep society flourishing. Yeah. But it's not necessarily like those are like the laws of the universe. Like it's not like that is how reality has to be.
Yeah.
It's like that's what we've done in order to like make something good and make something like meaningful.
Yeah. Which kind of goes back to your original point.
And so like to some extent like we are all kind of participating in that question of like what is real versus what is like a good loving thing to do, and those things aren't always necessarily the case. But I think that we get a little bit scared when the possibility that like what's happening isn't real enters our minds. And so it's like it's just a hard question to deal with, but that's what these characters are dealing with. And there are different times in our lives when that's when we have to deal with that too, I think. You know, there are times though where like truth and love aren't exactly the same, and that's when you kind of have to make a choice. And I think we as a society are going to deal with that more and more as we get into like AI development and like just advancing. Like there's going to be less and less things that are real, and we kind of have to figure that out.
So I don't know like the crazy workings of the universe, obviously, but like what I do believe, or what I choose to have faith in, is that if God made me and is ruler of all of that, and to be blessed to know that he wants me to like kind of join in the fun of like creation and creating things and trying to make this world better. Whether, you know, I think that kind of that relieves a lot of stress for me.
Sure.
Because if I didn't have like a faith belief where I truly believe that the maker is outside of all of that and has made all that and controls all that. If I didn't have that stance, then I'd be like, well, damn, like, I don't know. Like I'm just like kind of going through and like, maybe this is a simulation. Maybe this isn't real. Sure. Like, whatever, I guess. Maybe I'll come back. Maybe I won't. Maybe I don't exist. Like, I don't know.
But that can also go back to what you're saying about the pain thing, where it's like, if maybe like this isn't real or whatever, you still might as well choose the path that's going to be better for you or other people or whatever.
Like if this is a video game, like, get that XP, like, like level up, like be the coolest, like most loving dude in the video, like be your best NPC, you know what I'm saying? You know.
But I do like what you're saying about like how like we don't necessarily have to know all of the inner workings. And I think like we can't, like that's not even really a theoretical possibility. And
but I think does that matter though?
Right. Yeah. And I think that's what the end of the season kind of arrives at. Because like the way it wraps up is like, you know, like we find Evie and the girls have joined the Guilty Remnant, now led by Meg.
They didn't depart like a lot, or at least Nora seemed to have the biggest thought that was the case, maybe.
But like they've kind of joined because they took this position of like nothing really matters, like nothing's real. Miracle isn't this perfect place, and so might as well just like burn it all down. And that's what the Guilty Remnant ends up doing, is like invading the town. And then like John and Erica have to deal with like, oh, our daughter's love for us was never real. She was just faking it to like get by, basically. And then Kevin's dealing with, I died twice. And like what is even, I don't understand
John
anything.
Shoots his ass again.
And then like we get to like this conversation between the two of them. Where John is basically like, I don't understand what's happening. And Kevin says, me neither. What? And like despite all the like vitriol between them and like the journeys they've gone through, despite how different those journeys are, like they arrive at this same conclusion of like, I don't really get it. Like, why? Like, there's no point in me trying to kill you. Like, there's no point in.
You just respawn.
But like,
maybe it is a video game.
We might as well do the best that we can for each other. And like then they all like they go back home. Kevin goes to his home and like he sees everyone there, like his whole family, like Jill, Tommy, Nora, Patty's not there.
Nora has come back because she left him for a time.
Right. Lori's even there, and like Matt and his wife.
Yeah.
So like everyone's there, and like that's how the season ends. And I think that's like the final conclusion that these creators of the show have arrived at with this season is like you can't really know things like fully, and you can't like the meaning you derive out of things is like what you're creating or making up, like whether or not creating versus making up is like a legitimate distinction. That's kind of a debate, I think.
Yeah.
But like you kind of start with the people around you.
Yeah.
And those are the ones that are like gonna be what you fall back on and like what you should invest your life in, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I think there's two things that came to my mind when you were sharing that. One, I was just kind of maybe this is a stretch, but I don't think so. I think these creators are intentional with everything they do. But the beginning of this season, like we mentioned, starts with these people like just naked and like just trying to survive in a cave. And then one goes out and the rest are like cut off. And then she like basically dies because she doesn't have her community. Essentially, you could interpret that, I think.
Yeah, she's all alone.
Yeah, she's alone. And
she's not able to survive the wilderness without
because
anyone.
she's alone and doesn't have the community and that could like those the very few that might be with you, she dies.
Yeah.
But in the end of the season, it's kind of reversed. And like she had deep suffering, she's bleeding and like this whole stuff. And I'm kind of just realizing now at the end of the season, it's kind of a reversal.
Right.
Kevin is bleeding and he's out and he's like barely, but he makes it back to the cave if you will, and finds his like people and his community. Yeah. And it's cool. Like, it's almost like a bookending, like,
right. I'm sure that sounds like it's possible.
Yeah.
That's what they intended.
So it's like if you can survive even if you're like bleeding out. Like cuz Kevin is just literally like recovering from getting shot and like this whole thing, but like if you can make it home and be with your family and be with the people that have chosen to be in your life.
Right.
You can live and survive and Mythologos. I think for me, like watching this season, there's so many takeaways because it gets crazy and wacky, and there's like a bunch of stuff that it's kind of hitting on and talking about, and it's very moving. But I think one of the main things for me is like, don't take advantage of the shit that you go through. Like, because I mean, for Christians, we have this Christianese of like, like Paul said, like through my weakness, like Christ can be strong, essentially. And it's like, but I think for me, just simplifying, like, take advantage of the shit you go through, because you can choose to let it bring you down and keep you there, or you can try to learn from it and hopefully not to deny it. Because that's what I think a lot of people will say. Like, oh, just, like, learn from it. Like, get past it. Like, no, like, dig into it. Face it like Kevin did, face the pain. And then learn from that and discover who stayed with you. Yeah. And still accepts you on the post end of whatever that you is from that. And that's what I've had to learn. Like, the people that are still in my life chose to be there even though I went through all this shit. And it's like, wow, they are there for me and they care for me. Yeah. And if you can make that a formative of who you are and make that a healthy habit of like diving into the pain when it's tough, knowing that Jesus goes there before you, behind you, to your left and right, and with you, he will guide you through that and bring people into your life to help sustain you through it. At least that's what I've seen in my life, and I think this season kind of reminded me of that a lot.
Yeah, I think that's a good example too of like, there are like Christian elements in the show because of like Matt and stuff.
Yeah,
but they're like, it's not like it's like like they're evangelizing,
right,
but like
right.
you still took away things that like are specific to your life and situation and everything,
right?
And like interpreted the art you saw into like like a way that made sense in your own life, I think.
Right.
And I would say this show for me is actually probably more than any other show, and this season in particular is like the most formative thing that I've experienced in art.
Oh, wow.
Because I watched it at a time where I was like kind of past my deconstruction.
Yeah.
But I was like working at a church and like I wasn't into it.
As is very easy to become when you work at a church.
But like what I was struggling with was like, I felt like I had arrived at a place that was beyond that church and like beyond where the people at the church were at in their lives in a way. And I was kind of struggling with how do I still relate to these people or like treat them. I was kind of like in a Tommy place where I'm like, I feel like with their...
This is bullshit.
Yeah. It's hard for me to use the same language as these people when I don't believe that it's real or true.
Yeah, yeah.
And this show kind of...
Did you mean that in like their practice or like as a whole like interpretation like denominational practice? You feel like in that time?
I just mean like the culture at large, like the way that they express themselves, like the language they use.
Yeah.
Like if I were to say any of that stuff, it would feel inauthentic, and so I was struggling with like actually
hedge of protection,
actually talking even to them. And so like this show kind of, for me, like the idea, the philosophy of it being like, all these things that we think of as real are not necessarily the thing. It's just like what we bring to the table is what we take away from the table sometimes. Like that kind of helped me to accept that like other people can think completely differently than me. And yet we're still all like experiencing this crazy life that like so many things don't make sense and we have to fill in the holes in our own way. Yeah. And that doesn't make my way necessarily better than anyone else's way. And that kind of helped me with just accepting that and like trying to figure out. And I think that's where we arrive at the end with our characters is like they have to try to figure out how to relate to each other and live with each other. And that's what I like. Yeah. Now I'm in a place where I'm like, that's what I want to do more in my relationships.
Yeah. And, if you look at that last scene where they're all there and Kevin meets them in the house, like you're saying, each and every one of those characters probably has like a different interpretation of everything that's been happening. And season 3 kind of like will show that for sure and like kind of explore more. It's like, okay, we've all finally made it through the craziness of like kind of this denial, except like bringing into it like now what is life after this, and that's kind of what season 3 is a little bit more about. But the fact that all these crazy like different like backgrounds or like perspectives or even faith practices or beliefs, the fact that they're all sitting at the same table or can still come to the same house, like maybe that's like more like the gospel. Like maybe that's more of what Jesus is desiring us to do. Like, I mean, even at his Last Supper, like the same table was shared by betrayer and devouter or like, devout like disciple. Yeah. And yet like they all went through pain and like betrayal and like and all this stuff, but like they all drank the same cup and ate the same bread. Yeah.
Yep. And so there's obviously so much more that could be said about this show. We didn't really talk much about craft.
It's good.
It's good.
It's really good.
And I think like when you watch it, you see that. That's what I was saying at the beginning.
It's very, very good. The writing, the acting, the cinematography, even like just everything. The score, it's so good.
And I think, that this season, I think all of that is better from season 1 to season 2.
Yeah.
And like everything that happens in season 2 kind of like leaves you in a place of like, what could they possibly do next? Like you could pretty much do anything.
Yeah, they can go anywhere.
And so we'll get into that. We recommend you guys watch season 3. Mm-hmm. We'll talk about it next episode. Mm-hmm. But until then, Mythologos.
Logging.